Hey, thanks for joining me again. Today I wanted to go over the ignitions in the classic BMWs. On this Rosetta green BMW that I'm dealing with, it had a ignition problem, and I was kind of trying to figure out. I had to get the whole ignition cylinder out, and there's bits and pieces all over the internet of how to get these things out, but seems like they're not all together, and there's a reason, I think, for that. So I wanted to just make a video and do like a front to back ignition cylinder removal and ignition fixes, if you would. So just to get right into it. So I have this Rosetta green, and I had a problem with it. And what happened is I didn't have any power going to anything, and I also didn't have any. It didn't crank the car. So what I did is I dug underneath the steering column, and I went into the ignition, and this is what I found. This goes into the back. Here's my ignition. So there's where the key goes, and then this blew out of the back side. So obviously I had no power and I had no circuitry going on. So I think this is going to be the biggest problem that people run into, is just having to replace this plug. See if I can get this whole thing in the picture. So it's like just a whole plug, and it goes to the ignition, right? And so this goes into the back. So if you have this problem, usually you're in luck, because all you do, see if I can show it. There's a screw hole right here, and if you have this problem, basically you got to take this piece, and then there's a hole right here, and you line these up with that screw hole. And there's a little set screw that goes in there, and it holds this whole piece in. So yeah, that was my problem. That was my problem. But I got super lucky, because this has happened to this car before, and the guy that fixed this before put a wood screw in this hole, and then he just ground the end of the wood screw off. So it destroyed my whole ignition cylinder, and then this piece was already broken. So I need to extract this whole entire piece out of the car, and that's where I was at. So first problem you can have is this blowing out. That's good. Just replace it if the guy didn't mess with the screw. Another problem you can have is that the tumbler has an issue, and so this will actually separate from this. Or like I said, if you have the same problems that I do, you got to remove the whole thing. So let's go through on what to do here. So as I was saying, the first one is to have the end of this blow out, and you should know how to fix that now. So to show you on this piece here, so that little tiny screw hole ends up in here. So if you take that little screw out of there, then you can just pull that out, and then this thing will pull out the back of it. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense to you. So now if you want to pull just the tumbler out, you want to take this screw off here, and then that exposes this, and then you need to pull these 4 screws out. So I already have these loosened up just so I didn't waste a bunch of time on camera. But these were actually super tight. I had to use an impact screwdriver to get all these out. They were so tight. So you want to take these screws out. And I've got this other steering column next to me to show you something that you might run into too. Is that this is a spare column I have. And if you look, there's no screw. It's like a rivet. And then also down here, these are also rivets. So if you're going to try to take the ignition cylinder out of one of these, it's going to be a bigger pain in the butt, because you got to drill these out, from what I understand. I've never done this, but I think you got to drill these out, and then I'm guessing to put this back together, maybe you'll have to drill and tap. I'm not sure, but if you got one of these, sorry about that. We're going to put this to the side though, and we're just going to deal with this guy here. So I took this screw out, which exposes this, and then I put these 4 screws out to expose that. So let me see if I can show you how this is done. It's really not that hard once you get into it. So I'll move all this out of the way. This is my complete ignition setup. if you want to look at that. So this is what fell out of the other one. I'm not going to bother with fixing that, but this is what'll fix my other one. So now that we've got these 4 screws out, basically we want to lift this whole thing up, because if you look at this ignition cylinder that I've got out, if you push this in, it pushes this out. So by pushing that in, this is what locks it into that steering column. So if we look at this, this is sitting like this. So the steering column here is pushing down on that. So if that's pushed down all the time, that pins up in there, and then that can't be pulled out. So that's why we undid these 4 screws in here, is because we just want to lift this up. See that? And if you look under here, you can see that pin. So that pin's out now, and so now I should be able to push this thing through a little bit. So another thing to note though is I don't have the key for this, so I can't show you. But if you have the key in here and you turn it to the accessory or on position or anything, it'll suck that down in there for you, which you don't want in this situation, because then that pin's out again, right? So you have to turn the key all the way off, and then it'll pop this out. So obviously I've got no key in here, so we're fine. But I just want to pop that out. And then it's just stuck right here. If you can see that, the little, I don't know if I can hold all this. That pin gets stuck. So as soon as I moved it out enough, you got to kind of just put that pin back down and then push. And then everything will come sliding out. And then if you didn't know this is the wiring for the door chime. Super annoying, right? Nobody likes the door chime. So if this was my car that I was working on right now, I would just take this whole thing off and I'd throw it in the garbage, because that's how I feel about the door chime. But it's not, so I will leave it in. But if you want to take it off, there's just a flathead screw right there. That thing pulls off. And now I've got the whole ignition cylinder in my hand. So you can see this is where the electric connection goes. And again, this is the threaded hole for that set screw. So this is actually a good cylinder. But if you aren't replacing this whole thing, say you need to replace just this tumbler now there's another thing you got to do. And if you can get this out, this is easy, because, so let me try and orient it. So if you got this button here, and then this was up all right here. So when you uncovered this, it exposed this. But now let me take it, and I'm going to flip it up a little bit, and there's a little hole right here, right? So if you push that hole, and then you work this out, this is going to pull. Let's see if I can get it out. This will pull the whole tumbler out. There we go. So now I've got the tumbler out. So there you go, that's in there. So if you just need to replace the tumbler, which you might have to do, there's this spring right here. Yep. So if you can see that spring, you just got to press that spring in, which is done via that hole. So let me see if I can put it back together here. So like that. And then once you put it back together, it just snaps in, right? So there's a problem with that though. Let me see if I can show you. So if we put this thing back in, I'm just going to orient it. All right, so if we go back here, now that spring hole was right here where my thumb's at. So that's going to translate into this. There's no hole, as you can see. There's a little divot. So if you actually want to get to the tumbler through this hole, what you got to do is you got to drill this down through, and then you're going to have to get a tool that goes in here, pushes that spring, and then you can pull the tumbler out. I guess you could do that, but if it were me, I think I'm going to pull the whole steering column, and I'm going to do everything I did, and I'm going to end up with this, because that seems way easier than drilling and finding a tool and all that stuff. So, and then, you know, installation is just reversal of what I showed you. Just push that thing down, push it all in, put all your 4 bolts in, put these in, put that set screw in that holds the back of that ignition in, and that's pretty much it. So as you can see, it's not really that complicated. It's hard to tell through internet posts. I didn't really see any videos. Maybe I didn't look really hard though, but it's hard to tell from posts. Like, people are like, that spot right there, and then they can't really show you where. So hopefully that shows you how the ignition's pulled. It's actually really simple. Just a couple bolts. I mean, 5 bolts minus the removing the steering column. But you can replace the whole ignition cylinder. If you lose your keys, this is still doable. Like, you don't have to have the keys to do this. Anyway, it's super good. I hope you learned something. And if I missed a step, or you need some more information or something like that, just let me know in the comments. I hope this helps somebody get their ignition together and fix the problems. So I'm ready to put mine back in, and hopefully I can start my car now, because I think that was a big problem. So thanks for watching.